So welcome to our second Interactive CISO Roundtable of this year. So this is already March. We kind of skipped in January. I guess couldn't get over our hangover from the December party. So we started in February, which is a great session. So today again, we have industry experts. We have Edward Frye here. You see the name Gravity there. I hope he's not changing his name. But Edward is again a veteran of the security community. He's the CISO at Luminary Cloud. So Edward, would you like to a little bit elaborate for folks who don't know you here?
Sure. As you said, I'm the head of security for Luminary Cloud. I've been here for just over 10 months. Prior to that, I was at Ariaka Networks. Was there for 5 years as the CISO, and currently in my fourth role as a CISO. I also was on the board of directors as a president for the last 6 years, and on the board for the last 15 years for the Silicon Valley chapter of the Information System Security Association, ISSA. And happy to be here.
Thank you, Edward. Really appreciate it. And actually, Edward, I have to thank you because you were the first one, I think about 2.5 years ago, when we started the CISO Roundtable to help the community. And we started with Edward, was one of the first ones. And I think Mike was also.
I think Mike was as well.
Yeah, so both of you. So anyway, really appreciate it, again, having you here. Then we have Prakash Kalaiah, who's head of security and compliance at Enphase Energy. Prakash, can you maybe say a few more, if you want to elaborate a little bit more on your background for the audience, would be great.
Yeah, sure, Naveen. Hi, everybody. This is Prakash.
Can you turn on your video if you don't mind, unless you're driving?
Yeah, I need 5 more minutes to turn on,
Yeah, no problem. We'll go ahead and listen to your melodic voice to that time.
Thank you. So, okay. Yeah, I had to run to some unscheduled event, so I'm just getting back. Should be there 5 minutes.
Yeah, no worries, please.
I am leading the cybersecurity for Enphase Energy. We are one of the leading solar tech manufacturers. We make panels, batteries, inverters, the whole ecosystem. I am here since last 2.5 years, protecting the manufacturing and, as usual, the enterprise security, that kind of work. Before that, I was with Visa, driving end-to-end security for Visa products. I was part of the security architecture as head of product security and engineering. Prior to that, I was with Wells Fargo, Delta Rental, driving, the greenfield opportunities there. I'm happy to be here with the, excellent people here. Thank you.
Thank you, Prakash. And then we have Vishwas. Vishwas, again, is a veteran of the security industry, as well as a serial entrepreneur. He's right now founder of Precize, and I'll let him say about it rather than me taking his thrill. But earlier, he was founder of a company called NanoSec, which was acquired by SkyHigh, then McAfee, and he was the chief CTO over there. So, Vishwas, would you like to elaborate a little bit on your background for the...
Sure, I think Naveen has sort of given the background really well. I don't know how I can beat that, but I'll add a few lines to what he's already mentioned. I am now the founder and CEO of a company called Precize. We are looking at traceability, governance in highly dynamic environments in AI and cloud. So basically, if environments are changing really fast, whether you take cloud or AI, it's really hard to know who did what, why, when, where, and without that data, it's really impossible to sort of even, run workflows. And as Precize, that's where we are coming in. Those are the problems we saw when we were running in McAfee. It was a huge problem for us. And right now we are working with some of the largest companies out there. The biggest bank, I would say, one of the biggest insurance companies, the biggest networking company, and so on. So we're working with some of those to sort of, move the needle. I have a technology background. I'm the author of standards like the IPsec standard. I've written over 30 RFCs and stuff. I've been the author of some of the early TTPs around MITRE attack and containers and so on. So you can search for my name and find that. So mainly a technologist, now converted myself, to an entrepreneur and trying to sell stuff, right? That's not what my, strengths are, but that's where I am right now. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So let's get started. So basically, some of you have attended these events before. So first, the theme around is more about CISO, since it's a CISO roundtable. So I like to ask generally how the CISOs are seeing, their role, which has evolved over the years. Let's say we'll call it last 5, 10 years, and now, and how it's evolving even further with all these innovations happening with the digitization as well as AI-Jason and going forward. So with that, the theme is about, so how do you think, so maybe we'll start with Edward. Hi, Edward. So if you would like to talk about a little bit the CISO's evolution of the CISO's role, and where do you think it's going over the next few years or 5 years, if you can see that far?
Sure. So part of my my evolution, and this is where I came from. Is it came from a started off as a very technical position, and I started off on the network, on the systems, in IT, and part of the IT department. And over the last 5 or so years, moved significantly more into the business side of things. While dealing with compliance, the vision of the organization has gotten much, much larger, getting into all kinds of different aspects of the business and how things are accomplished. And I think that's only going to continue. And rather than being a technical leader, I think the CISO is going to be more of a trusted advisor within the leadership of the organization. And that's how I see it working in my role. I think some of the technologies that are coming out, you still have to have your pulse on what's going on, for example, with AI and that sort of thing. So there's a bit of where I come from.
Thank you, Edward. Prakash, thank you for being there. Now we can see Prakash's handsome face. Prakash, so I don't know if you heard the question. The first one is more around the CISO. Yeah, please go ahead. What you think.
I got it. It takes me back memories down the road, right? Like, because this used to be my interview question, because people used to ask, hey, what do you like about cyber, and what kind of work do you want to do? I think that's exactly where we are going. So I used to tell hey, I don't want to do security for the sake of doing security. I really want security to really help the business. May not be exactly same words. I used to say, hey, I want to really make sure people use security in their products and embed it and make sure it sells more because of security. I think that's where we are heading to. From last 5 to 10 years, more CISOs have become business persons, and also getting into boardroom, presenting about security. That has become like a norm now. And from technologies, everybody has become business, and it's very critical for security to align with business and kind of do things to help business. And also, security is no more seen as a cost center, because I have seen, including me, delivering some solutions which are bringing in revenue for the company. So it's no more seen as technical role. It has to align with business, and also it's from going from cost center to like a profit center to even bring in revenue for the company. I'm proud to say in one of my previous roles, there was a bit of struggle, but we implemented a security solution without going into much details. It made life onboarding consumers and customers and partners so quick. We were able to kind of meet our revenue target so quickly. Like, people were kind of amazed. Hey, such a simple security solution can really add in so much to revenue. I think that's where we are headed to. Security really becoming like a business driver and revenue earner.
Thank you, Prakash. Vishwas, I mean, you have interacted a lot of CISOs, so how do you see from the other
I'll
side?
extend, yeah, I'll extend what Prakash already said, right? We are in a fast changing world. Things are changing really quickly, really fast. And while people have looked at security more as a sort of a, like he said, a cost center, the way to look at it is, in my view, right? We are in a race, right? Everybody is sort of trying to build things, change, and things are changing really fast. We're in like a car race. The security is like the brake. You can drive faster if you know your brake is working. You can change faster, you can do things faster if you know your brake is working. If you do not know your brake is working, you're going to be very, very cautious. You drive at 10 miles an hour, 5 miles an hour, you're not going to be really good. So from my perspective, in a world that is continuously changing, fast updating, really, where things are, where the rate of change is very, very high, my view is the way I look at security and the way I look at evolve is it has to evolve with the speed of change, has to be more dynamic, has to be more sort of precise, right? As an example, you cannot just put the brake just because you reach a turn. You're going to slow down, but you do not necessarily need to apply a brake at every turn or every change or every time you see another car heading in the reverse direction. So from my perspective, security has to be applied in a very, very cautious way. It has to be done in a way where it helps business, but it aligns and sort of is 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 slowing things down only when it's required and helping or enabling business as far as possible. And that's how I see it. So and for me in my world, my view is having deep visibility of what's happening in your environment, who's doing it, why it's happening, right, in this fast changing world is almost impossible. Think of a agentic AI case or a cloud case where you check in some code, something happens in your CI/CD pipeline, something gets deployed. Who did the change that led to this, something being deployed? It takes months and weeks or even days for people to actually figure that out. And this, it's supposed to be a very small solution, but is a very hard thing for people to know. And so from my perspective, that's how I see security has to evolve. Again, I'm not from a CISO perspective, but that's where I see the companies evolving or where I see things probably moving towards.
Thank you, Vishwas. So since we have other CISOs also in the audience, so I'd like to extend it to other folks. If you want to chime in or provide your insights, like Mike, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. The
Well, one thing before that, sorry, Mike,
go
a
ahead.
couple of lines on your background for some of the folks. Of course, I've known Mike's, again, a veteran of CISO community as well as a CISO practicing. So if you want to say a little bit more.
Sure.
Great.
Yeah, I'm kind of a multi-time CISO. I've been a CISO at, multiple companies, tend to focus on SaaS, specifically technology in general. I think the role's evolved in a few ways, but it's also different based on industry, right? So like in SaaS businesses, there's always this customer-facing role that might not exist in other types of businesses. So on the one hand, we can look at maybe like strategic, tactical, and operational CISOs, and these are different different companies are going to be ready for a CISO to operate at this level at different times, right? Like you could be a very technical focused CISO. Some organizations, that's what they're ready for. It could be a very executive focused CISO. Other organizations, that's what it's ready for. It could be, transformation change agent, program builder, steady state, all of these things. And then there's things that are related to what business it's in, right? It's a SaaS, so you need someone who can meet with customers, help make customers comfortable. It's a product business, so someone who can help, secure the product and make sure that products get built with security in mind, right? So these types of things, right, I think are just as important as this notion that the CISO over time has become less of a technical role and more of a leadership role or more of an executive role. I think that's true, but I also think that relates to the stage of a company, and it relates to the industry you're in. Just as much as it's a generic statement, right? So those are my thoughts on kind of the evolution of the role.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to, Neil, King, or anyone who wants to have any questions or provide their insights? Anyone who's a CISO or even in the community? Otherwise, we'll jump into our favorite topic with Vishwas. How about giving a little landscape on the AI security side from your perspective, as well as you are also involved with the Cloud Security Alliance teams, right, in various writing standards, etc. So it'll be great to have a quick, overview for the team, and then we can kind of lead it into a discussion.
Sure. So I can, again, this is out of the syllabus question. You didn't tell me you're going to ask this question, but okay, I will sort of,
See, that's the idea, right? To see that you give the real insights.
Okay. Okay. So from my perspective, right, the way I look at it is, right, AI has been there for a long time. People have used what you would call predictive AI, right? So you had data in the past, you looked at the past data and predicted, the next thing. So whether it is predicting the weather, predicting the stock price, it's been used for a long time, and that's where AI has been for a long time, right? And nearly in the security industry, nearly every company has used AI for sort of detecting, anomalies and so on. So we've done it ourselves, right? And that's been there. What has changed over the last 3 years has been more of what you'd call generative AI. Generative AI is the next level of, predictive, next level of AI, as you would call it, right? Instead of looking at past data to predict the future data, what generative AI does is you can look at past photos and create a new photo that looks nothing like any of the photos that you've ever seen. It takes certain features from all these photos but creates a new photo. Or you take all the past poetry that is there and you ask it to create a poetry based on your request and it creates new poetry. So generative AI, what it has done is it's created some new use cases, new things, and it can create new content that you've never seen before. And it started off with people asking to create poetry, and that's how it took off. But now generative AI has become a lot broader. While 2022, I would say, was the year of large language models, which was like, hey, you give a model, a document, ask it to summarize the document, ask it to analyze the document, ask it to create new data based on what it has already seen, and it would create it. Right? That is where 2022 was. In 2023, we've gone into the age of, either multimodal AI, which would be like, hey, instead of just looking at text, we've now gotten into creating videos, creating pictures, creating photographs, creating, audio, and so on. It's of course been very interesting for people, but it has also created a lot of deep fakes. And then this year, it's been more of the age of agentic AI, right? 2025, as we call it. This is more about using LLMs not just to create content or analyze content, but now looking and using generative AI to do system two thinking, right? What system two thinking is let me first talk about system one thinking. If I asked what is the capital of California, you do not need to think very much. As long as you have the data, you can give the answer. That is system one thinking. That's how LLMs worked. System two thinking is basically being able to analyze various different options, being able to figure out various different things, and then give an answer. So, as an example, if I'm trying to travel to Bangalore, I say, "Hey, give me my best option to travel to Bangalore." What an agent could now do is look at various options, evaluate various options, whether I can fly from a direct flight or indirect flight or whatever else, and take it from there. It would the agent would actually analyze your data, look at all the data. It would actually be able to sort of do, like I said, system two thinking, and it would actually be able to connect to tools to actually do the actions, right? So it's agent has become like the application layer, with LLM being the data layer, and then you've got the sort of the interface layer, which could be your the language layer, the natural language layer. That's how the applications are changing, and that's how I see AI itself changing, right? So 2022 being the year of large language model, 2023 we are moving towards multimodal models, co-pilots, and 2024 we are moving to AI, agentic AI, and more deeper thinking, models where we are able to do more deeper thinking, work than just sort of ask it a question and get a response based on the data provided. So that's how I see the evolution. Security, of course, changes with it, but I'll not go into details of it. I'll let others sort of probably interject and give their opinions on that.
Edward, do you want to take a crack on
Sure,
how
yeah.
you
So some of the things that I've seen, and I'll echo what Vishwas said. We've been using, machine learning is what it was originally called for a very long time, where you would find a pattern and look for outliers. That goes back long time. I was using that in the security operations center, 10, 15 years ago, looking for anomalies and heuristic-based detection engines and that sort of thing. And then we moved into the large language models, but even before that, it was just detective things like speech to text translation and that sort of thing, and being able to understand what a person does or says or asks from like my voice saying, tell me this. And then Alexa saying, here's what you asked me, here's the result, or something like that. And so those types of detective things exist in security as well, to show you different things. When looking at those types of things from a security perspective, some of the things that I would think about are these patterns appropriate? Are we tuning them right? Are we feeding them the right data so that we're building the models correctly and that sort of thing? Now that we're looking into more of the agentic AI, from my perspective, I have to consider, one, there's that underlying model and how that's handling the language of the prompts and that sort of thing. Then I have to analyze, how are those prompts going to that language? What is the response? Is that appropriate? Am I sending the right data? Am I protecting the appropriate data from a privacy perspective or a intellectual property perspective? Do I have those contracts in place? Are these things secure? And is my subprocessor or my language model being trained on the data that I'm providing? And so, I think one thing, these things are here. They're not going to go away. The agentic AI, where there's a reasoning model, where it's where you ask it a question, or you say, hey, I'm trying to do this, and it goes and figures out in your system or in your platform whether or not that's appropriate, the data that it has access to in your platform, and then goes and looks it up. One use case, I heard PK talk a couple of years ago of travel and stuff like that, asking an AI, hey, I'm here and I want to go to Bangalore, tell me the best routes and what hotels and that sort of thing. And interacting with one of those agentic AIs of, hey, I need to change this, or I want to upgrade my flight, or I want to upgrade that leg, and then actually going and doing it without ever talking to a human. Those have existed for a couple of years as well. Now I think it's getting into more detailed application, processing, reasoning, and taking the inputs from what you've asked it, what it knows, what the application has created, bringing that all together, and then trying to reason and show some output to you that's what you're looking for. Now, with all of those things, there's multiple layers of security that need to be considered. And is somebody trying to bypass that? Are they throwing in prompts to get away from your prompts? Are they trying to break your lang chain? Are they trying to break the LLM? Those types of things. So lots of areas to consider when building a program or analyzing a program around these things. And security needs to be an enabler. So, there was some legal teams and such that had said, no, we're not going to use AI, or we're not going to use Gen AI, or we've got contracts where somebody says, hey, you can't use Gen AI at all, or you have to get permission. And so some of those types of conversation are, well, if you do that, then these things aren't available to you. Or if you don't do that, here's the risks, and here's the contracts in place, and here's how we're protecting that data. And so there is a lot of third-party risk management that needs to be considered as well when doing that.
Thank you, Edward. Prakash, how are you looking at it from your, I mean, you're a publicly held company, and how are you looking at when your employees and everyone trying to use these AI, all the cool stuff, but how do you look at it from a security perspective to safeguard?
Yeah, I think, we followed same the industry practice, writing down a policy, putting controls and, initially blocking it, all those things. But here is, one of the eye-opener statement, one of my friend, being a security practitioner, he himself, was telling, hey, I know, everybody is stopping developers from, putting their source code into LLM and figuring out issues. But have you guys thought of somebody, who might have source code already for, somebody's product and they have dumped it into LLM and they figured out the issues? That's a, kind of eye-opener statement because, many organizations, we were kind of saying, hey, we don't want to use it for purpose 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't want to, pump in code or do something. But we have to kind of, remember, just like Vishwas was telling, right? We see things are already happening, and it might be so that somebody has already put some data which you are trying to protect, and they already know the weaknesses. I think we are, really working against that. I just wanted to throw it out there as a thinking point for many of the practitioners, because we try to kind of prevent doing a lot of things for the engineering teams, but maybe sometimes it will work against us for security practitioners. But apart from that, I agree whatever has been told till now. Nothing much to add. But one of my favorite is the impact of AI. At least I see in the real world is the deep fake impact. Like we are getting a lot of voice messages, text messages, video messages. We see it in the wild trying to exploit people. So I think that's another area where cybersecurity experts need to kind of learn new ways how to protect against such kind of new attacks. Of course, AI has brought in extended lot of product security and application security attacks like prompt injection, data protection, leakage of data if there is no proper authorization. Just to give one quick example, I was looking at some of the designs, not in my company, but other companies. They were telling, hey, I'm going to build a AI to kind of look through HR data. I said, make sure your authorization is in place because you don't want somebody to question and say, hey, show me pay pay scale for this person, and it should not disclose to an unwanted person. I think that is some kind of we need to remember, all of us, when doing AI, we don't break those rules, authentication, authorization, privacy, just to make sure those controls still exist and AI works within those realms.
I'd like to tag on that a little bit. One of the things that I've seen is more a problem in a security organization where the access to those things is obscured or it's very complex access control. You've got files in there. And what AI can allow an insider threat, for example, to do to share salary information is to go analyze something that somebody has access to that they probably shouldn't have had access to in the beginning, such as asking for salary information or review information about a person that they don't have. But because they have been granted access, they can ask the AI to go find that information for them. And that access was granted maybe erroneously or something like that. And I think that, from my perspective, is we got to be, with AI, we have to be doing the basics even better, and be more efficient in how we could do our access control and provisioning and that sort of thing.
Thank you, Edward. Vishwas, do you want to?
Yeah, I think I just add to what Edward just said. I hear from people that one of the reasons companies are not enabling, Copilot as an example, is not that is because people are now able to access certain kinds of data that they were not able to. It's not that the permissions have changed. Permissions are still there. Earlier, to get to, say, if I want to get CEO's salary, like Prakash mentioned, it would be very hard for me. I would have to go to one access to another access to figure out what other permission that access has, another identity, right? Service identity. I could get it. With AI, all that is automated. If you ask a question, AI is going to go figure out whatever possible mechanism to get that data, right? And so the permissions are always there. Things are always may not be may have always been working that way, but with AI, things become automated, and so things can become a lot more easier. It may be a lot more easier to discover, the data that could be malicious or inappropriate in certain cases. So I am sort of totally aligned with that. One interesting case I'll tell you, right? So what we've seen is, because, right, and this is with agentic AI, and we use LangGraph for our own agents and so on. What we've seen is agents use LLMs for for doing all the reasoning. The reasoning, the LLM themselves use real world data to do reasoning, right? They use real world data to sort of learn things. Now, assume two people are working on an agent, Naveen and Vishwas. Naveen says, agent, do X. Vishwas says, agent, do not do X, do Y. What would a human do in a case like this? The human would what the human would in this case would do this, right? For Naveen, it would say, "Hey, Naveen, I am doing X because that's what you asked me to do." But for Vishwas, it would say, "Hey, I'm doing Y." It would hide behavior, right? And because agents and large language models are trained on real world data, and they've seen when there's a conflict, this is what humans do. They tell one thing to one person, another thing to another person, and they sort of make sure that things are sort of covered. And that's what we've seen uh, language models do, or agents do, which is interesting because that's what humans would do. But it's also a bit scary because now they are trying to replicate behavior that we would not want the models or AI agents to be actually be doing. And the problem, another big problem in all this is agents and large language models take guardrails as advice. They do not take it as something that they cannot violate. So they take it as good advice, good to have advice, but not something that they cannot violate. And so it's been become pretty hard in a lot of cases to sort of control what these models do. So just giving you some examples of it, and just extending on what Edward or Gravity just mentioned.
Yeah. If I may, I'd like to add to what Edward, Gravity, and Vishwas mentioned. Right now, AI is at such a stage that it reminds me of when DARPANET was first deployed, and you could literally finger anyone that was connected, get their IP address. With the IP address, literally go into the directory and see everything that they posted on their network. It's that unsecure. With that being said, with the right practitioners, AI is being utilized in a very productive way. Not that you cannot remove the guardrails. I myself have developers working on MVP data sets where guardrails were removed from every single um, uh, foundational model to basically generate synthetic security data. And what synthetic security data means is we take zero-day exploits or vulnerabilities and create variants of it. You can literally manufacture malware with just about every single foundational model today. So misappropriation of foundational models and LLMs is ongoing. The adversarial actors have had malware as a service for quite some time, for nearly 2 years now. And the only way to scale and to combat them is to utilize AI to basically predict what is an attack, what is not an attack, and to detect it at machine scale. Currently being able to detect, let's say, 90 or 95% of zero-day exploits, great at human level, horrible at machine level. You're literally missing about 50,000 zero-day exploits on a daily basis, and it's only growing. Just wanted to get that input in there, and also throw a grenade and leave the room. Has anyone utilized NVIDIA's Morpheus platform, and to what effect?
Like, no one.
You mean the new Nemo platform?
No, Morpheus.
I think they renamed it last week.
Did they? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's no longer Morpheus. Okay. The same platform that detects anomalies on your network. I know that this is something that NVIDIA has been working on for the last 2 years. The adoption has been, well, minimal at best, but I know that GSIs are really keen to engage with all sorts of customers on deployment of the new NVIDIA security platform.
I'm mistaken. It was another thing that got another one of their AI things that got renamed to Nemo. It was their physics stuff.
So it still is Morpheus.
Yeah, on their website it is.
Okay, excellent.
All right. So moving, I wanted to just move the little bit of discussion into the future, and towards how do you see like the future of this, this evolution in the Gen AI side related to the security compliance and risk management? Probably, I think, Edward, you'll be a good one to start off with that.
Ooh. From a security and compliance perspective, dealing with auditors and that sort of thing, I'm going to say that it's going to be difficult. A lot of things change very quickly, and things have changed so quickly with regards to models and agentic AI, new announcements every day. And from a compliance perspective, the laws, the regulations, and the recommendations from these organizations don't change that quickly. Some of these organizations are still recommending the old way of having a password management and having password rotation every 60 or 90 days. And if you don't follow that, the auditor's like, hey, you don't have this. We're like, NIST changed that 3 years ago. Why are you still coming after me on this? So, if you take a risk-based approach on how you implement your security, and you actually look at the risk, you look at them as actual business cases and exploitability and that sort of thing, and you address those, I think from a compliance perspective, you'll be able to satisfy your auditors, satisfy your framework, so long as you're doing those basic things and addressing the risk components of your AI, how you're using it, what you look for when you're using these tools, or when you're building your AI agent, or when you're using an AI agent to help you build your software. How do you look at that? What type of security tools do you use from a pen testing perspective, from a code analysis perspective, from a third-party risk management perspective? If you're using all of these techniques across this, then you'll be able to satisfy those compliance efforts. Some of the new things that are coming out are actually getting easier because they are taking that risk-based approach and not a documentation approach. Like if you look at the new FedRAMP 2.0 proposals and such, the documentation and how you ask the questions and what you're looking for are going to be a little bit different. So I think things are going to come up, but I think compliance is still going to be lagging from that perspective.
Prakash, how do you see from your side for your company? Of course, you probably have a lot of compliances to be taken care of.
Yeah, I totally, kind of aligned and agree with Edward, what he said. In addition to that, I think, the other big concern is when it comes to privacy and security is like, the output of, this is like age-old problem of LLM, how do you really deal with output of LLM? Would it cause us problem down the road? Could it be somebody's IP, or would somebody come back later and say, hey, your application or product has, some of our, code base. Um, like you can always go to some LLM engine and say, hey, can you show me how to solve this ASIC problem or IC problem, or, what is the best way to do this kind of routing? Then it can bring some information from its database and give it to us. But from privacy perspective, that's where the majority of concern is. How do I make sure we are not violating somebody's IP and LLM is giving me kind of a public information and not somebody's private, or maybe accidentally somebody fed their private data and the LLM is keeping it there for learning. And the other big one is, supply chain risks for both, security aspects and privacy aspect. Many suppliers, I don't know if anybody has faced this, they started turning on their AI without even telling us. So then we have to go back from both privacy and security side saying, hey guys, you cannot turn on, uh, you know, AI without even, informing us, or do a thorough review. How is it going to change the service? How it is going to change the data security and privacy? So I think that's the other additional things I would like to add to what Edward said. The supply chain risk and the IP exposure issue or IP problem maybe down the road when we start using, too much of AI.
Yeah, I'm curious if I can ask a question. For the practitioners out there, have you guys dealt with employees that are trying to use the operator tool from ChatGPT, which uses the computer and it basically sends a prompt to a browser, the Linux browser that's hosted by ChatGPT, and then it does any number of minutes or even longer of work, and then finally comes back with a response after taking a bunch of actions on your behalf. So it's interesting in that, from the normal security controls, you really don't see anything that the agent's actually doing. It's all kind of behind the scenes. So I'm curious as to how, you guys think about this both from a compliance perspective and also from a controls perspective, because it really does feel like a new use case and challenge compared to what your endpoint and network, software is typically able to help address.
Anyone?
I haven't seen anyone use that specifically, but the way I think of the problem is a bit like early infrastructure or early infrastructure as a service, early AWS, right? If you think about early AWS, it was essentially, even if you go a step further to the left, you think about early SaaS, right? They both started as these sort of black boxes to customers' security teams, right? Like, okay, I'm using, SaaS product X. Your security team has no more visibility because it's no longer in their boundary, right? Okay. Now we've solved that problem, but now we're using AWS. Okay, your security team has no more visibility because it's not in your data center anymore. And then later, we come out, these companies build layers that start providing that visibility, right? Like Salesforce Shield, where you can start getting your audit trails, directly into your SIM, for example, or, AWS Guard Duty or CloudTrail logs, et cetera, right? I guess so. When I think of this whole problem space, I'm not directly familiar with what the GPT operator, but I am familiar with the fact that generative AI can talk to the back end, other things on the back end via APIs, right? And then you won't have that visibility anymore because it's not coming from like your workstation talking to whatever this, second, third party thing is. It's coming from the AI application that's talking to them. So I think eventually we'll get to a point where things are instrumented to kind of give you better visibility. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're far enough along that a lot of people are asking for this visibility yet either, because I think a lot of people aren't aware that, like a a generative AI application is not a standalone thing. It reaches out to other services to make use of them on your behalf. And so I think we're like very early days with this problem space you're calling out.
So I would actually like to, maybe, challenge maybe Neil and Prakash on this, right? And just to stir the pot, of course, right? So from my perspective, right, if you're using a SaaS service, and it's actually probably better aligned with what Mike just mentioned, if you're using a SaaS service, this is not a new SaaS service. Yes, from my perspective, the generative AI, instead of using a database, you're using a generative LLMs that are creating new data. But how is it any different from using a SaaS service? You need to protect the data that goes out to the SaaS service, protect the data that comes out of it. The only difference I see is with generative AI, if a model is trained with your data, then you need to make sure, you need to look at the contract that they're not training the models with your data. That's the only difference I see. But other than that, I see it exactly the same thing. Again, leave aside, code generation and so on. There's no difference. Now you can say, hey, just because earlier we were using a database at the back end, now we're trying to generate new code. How does that vary? As long as you make sure that no critical data goes out to a SaaS service, just because it uses a SaaS, just because it uses generative AI, how does it matter?
Yeah, well, or if it has access to your tools, I think that's where it becomes more interesting, right? So if it can take actions and has access to your tools, which may include Google Drive or other kind of sensitive data, yeah, then
But that's the
that
same thing
becomes
with SaaS, right? Right now, you can have SaaS access on your behalf certain things, kind of data, and it's no different. There's no difference, at least in my mind, other than the fact that it trains on your data, and when it trains, you want, and you do not want it to be trained, then you sort of look at the contracts. That's why I see it. So from my perspective, if third parties are actually enabling, generative AI, the controls that you need to have are mainly around looking at your contracts and making sure that the contracts do not allow them to train using your data, which are not anonymous. So if you anonymize the data or generalize the data and use it, it's probably okay. But if it's using my data verbatim, that could be an issue. That's how I see it.
So I do see one thing that does impact the risk, and that's the fourth and fifth party type of concerns. If you're using if you were to access Luminary Cloud, we've got a list of third parties that we leverage, and we make sure that our contracts and that sort of thing. But then there's the fourth party. Who are they using? And so on. That whole chain of that supply is, where is that coming from? Who's it using? Do we have a contract with that fourth party? If I'm using a LangChain type thing, are they using OpenAI? Are they using Gemini? Are they using Anthropic? Are they using somebody else? And where do those things come in? That's one place that I see that it's a little bit different. You still have that problem with any SaaSes. Who are the third parties that they're leveraging? And I had another point on that. I hadn't actually seen this, and this actually looks very interesting. That it's it actually has access to your browser, so anything your browser has access to, it has access to, and then it can just act as you. That is interesting. But as Vishwas said, is if you've granted access to an API from your third party to access your systems, then that also has that capability. So what is it doing? It's acting as you. Did you give it the permissions to do that? But I can still see this as having a similar problem of, let's say Grammarly sitting in your browser and accessing everything you type in your browser to make sure that it's correct, or everything in that window is now accessible and copyright to them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, this takes me back to last week's SciNet seminar. Somebody was asking question, hey, do agentic AIs have identity? Do you give them names or do you give them account names? I think, this is a very good question. And unfortunately, there is no single answer. I think it's two-folded answer. One is like what Edward and Vishwas said, hey, and also Mike said, It is the same fundamental thing we are doing, but we might be doing it different way. Make sure we are following the same practices, what we are doing with the security. But we also see, we need to watch out, how this is going to evolve. Because, there was a sentiment, like Vishwas, you said, right? Hey, now it's trying to mimic the human behavior. But, that's what we need to watch out for, how it will behave when it start accessing all the tools a SOC analyst has. How is it going to behave? How is it going to, use the data to learn? So I think it's not, we can all just keep our foundations, safe and secure and follow the same practices to make sure we have all the data access, authentication, authorization, third party, fourth party security risks contained, and also supply chain thing. But we also need to watch out, how this thing will really grow into. I don't know, we might be getting close to something else.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Prakash. So there is I think we have time for one more question. There are a number of them actually in the chat side if you guys want to answer. But there is one question, is someone from Patrick Thomas. Patrick, you want to say it yourself? Or basically you would like to know about adversarial AI attack on open source LLM models.
Yeah.
Patrick, do you want to just kind of quickly introduce yourself, a couple of lines, and then
Sure. Yeah, hi,
context of
my name
your
is
question?
Patrick Ben. Yeah, my name is Patrick Ben, and I'm also from a cybersecurity background, and I was really curious to know about, about AI and the discussion which we had all the time. So I was curious to know like what kind of adversarial attacks can happen on LLM models, because the open source LLM models, which is OLAMA model, which is already out there, uh, hackers are downloading and trying to find multiple bypasses on prompt injections and multiple other attacks, right? So I was curious to know like what can be the best prevention methods for such attacks.
So a thought on open source LLMs and models that you would download and such. There's a website where it just lists all kinds of models that you can just go pick one, download it, and then use it. The things to think about with those types of things are, one, is there any kind of injection in the model itself? Is there a call out that it's calling to something or downloading something? Is it accessing something that it shouldn't be, that you're not aware of based on a certain call or certain library that's loaded into the model, into the vectors, and it says, I'm going to go do this. So there's those types of injections. There's biases that can be added where you just pump it full of data that points to a certain direction and gives you a certain kind of result based on how it's been fed and trained. And you could take one model, feed it more, and create another model, and then share that. And so there's those types of attacks that are happening on the LLM side. I've seen some talks from a fellow CISO. There's a couple of tools out there like Calypso or I forget what Malcolm's doing, and he's talking about that, where they're actually looking at the vector files, looking for bias, looking for call outs like libraries or injections like an XML injection or something like that inside there, or code injection inside the tool. And then other things that you would do, probably things like lang chains and prompt filtering and guardrails on your model.
Yeah, the main concern for me was, I'm into penetration testing and cybersecurity research. So what I have done earlier was I was able to download the OLAMA models from Meta itself, and I was trying to make some bypasses for that. So in that, I was able to find out some prompt injection attacks and some insecure output handling. So that was the major bugs which it was already having. And I was able to bypass these security policies and the privacy policies in one way or other. Why I was able to do that? It's mainly because it was already available out for me to test it because it's open source. So my concern was many startups are using these open source models, right? So when they are also using the same model as their backend, people who have already bypassed that models can still bypass the new startups, right, who are using the same models. So I was confused, like if this is happening, then how startups can be secure in this realm of AI. So
I can give you one
that's so that what.
I can so like in my view, right? Nearly all models can be sort of you are insecure. You can make them, you know, it's like this, right? You built a house, you've made it secure as possible. But if somebody comes with a tank and fires at your home, you cannot protect against it. So it depends on the effort that the adversary takes to sort of break something, and how much you are doing to protect it. So from my perspective, right? If you're not exposing your model directly to a user, right? Whatever he gives prompt, first you see, is it relevant for my use case? My use case, if you've got a narrow use case, I'm from drug discovery and somebody asks you to write code for something else, you're going to deny it. You see, categorize it. You can do a lot of checks and using the same model or even a lighter weight model to sort of get the output. The problem that I see is not that you cannot prevent like prompt injection directly, right? Like if you it's like exactly like I said, right? If you've got a house, if you put tanks to protect you all over, and you have a plane that's flying overhead or a helicopter that's flying, you're going to protect it, right? But the problem is the models that we use for to find prompt injection are lighter weight model. They're neural networks that aren't very heavy, right? Because the cost of security cannot be as more than the cost of the asset that it's protecting, right? And so from my perspective, you have to
Yeah.
sort of balance those things, and the easiest way to balance it is by sort of not directly exposing the prompts to the from the user to the to the model, but actually doing some checks before it sort of goes through, and translating it before you sort of send it out could be one of the ways, right? And that's what we've done from our side to be able to prevent it, because we exposed our model first, right? First time as a chatbot, we found people writing code, asking all sorts of stupid things, right? And so we've tightened that quite a lot to be make sure that it's not doing things that it's not supposed to do, and not passing that to the model that's actually looking at my data before you sort of do anything. That's what we've sort of done. Again, like I said, we could make it tighter, but the cost of protecting would be so high. Like they said, the cost of security probably 5% or 10% of the IT budget. But if you put 50% of your costs into protecting the every prompt coming in, it takes as much as as much cost as the actual serving the output. Then it will not actually sort of work in my view. So you have to balance those two.
I have one
Hey,
last question.
so
So
we are
what if the
just Patrick, sorry, just we are out of time, but if you guys want to answer, so we we can extend for another minute. So go ahead, please. Or anyone
yeah,
else
it's the
also
last
just
question.
wanted to make sure. Is anyone else has any questions or you want to give any insights, please? Just wanted to make sure that everyone has an opportunity. So Patrick will come back to you in case no one else.
Sure.
Sarang,
So
Manoj, yes, please.
one quick thing, there are thousands of models out there that you can play with, and Hugging Face is the name of the website that I was thinking of.
Yes.
So anyone else, Sunil, Sarang, Ritesh, I'm just kind of calling out the names. Glad. Anyone else,
Sure,
you have
Naveen.
any insights or any question you want to provide quickly? Let's call it
Yeah,
next
I
one.
would like to add insights is that I was at NVIDIA GTC conference, like the other gentleman was mentioning, and there were several talks on securing LLMs and the what do you call like the governance around it from the government perspective. And one of the EU laws which came out recently, I met somebody from Italy, and he was talking about how EU AI law went into effect, the AI Act, and the trust and safety person from NVIDIA was talking about how some of the, especially in the regulated industry. I worked in healthcare for Anthem, and I was the BISO for Anthem, and they can't use AI for diagnosis, some specific areas, right? So I think that's where we will be seeing more. I think from like a AI Act coming up in US as well. So if anybody has insight onto it more, that'll be good to know.
Anyone? Manoj, looks like you want to say something, maybe a couple of lines. You can talk about yourself and then whatever the insights
No,
or
most of
questions.
the things like are covered by the more audience, but yeah, definitely I was like trying to put for the data side because when passing data and outputting data and interacting with the other systems outside the application, how that will be hardening. So that will be, I think, that will be the costly affair as well. But yeah, maybe topic for the next time.
Okay. No, absolutely.
I-
We'll have another one end of April or May. Go ahead,
Sorry,
Saran.
it's a bit too late to be asking questions. I understand. I just had one question though. So while enterprises are using LLMs now, and prompts are going out of your company to the LLM or services like OpenAI or Azure AI and such, there is there are guardrails in place where you sanitize the prompts that go out. Or the responses that come in and so on. I was curious, like, how does it affect your experience? Because it's going to go through a whole bunch of, sanitization LLM calls themselves, right? I'm going to send a prompt. It's going to go through another LLM. It's going to get checked again. It's going to filter something out and so on. And then finally reach the end LLM that I'm trying to reach. First of all, what are people using to sanitize these prompts in between, and how does it affect your overall experience or latency when you're trying to get the answers to your questions fast? Just curious, like if anybody has experience or dealing with it. I think Vishwas mentioned something, so would be curious to know how this is being handled.
If you want me to answer, I can say that we use moderation endpoints. OpenAI provides free moderation endpoints right now. Again, they are very lightweight neural networks. You can use it before calling an API. You can call that. That works, but it's again not very good, right? So we have to build use case specific sort of filtering before we actually call these moderation endpoints. Azure, I would say, has the best moderation out there. You can do copyright moderation, saying, hey, do not allow copyrighted content to be pushed in or pushed out, and you can do that. You can actually give patterns of copyrighted content and say, hey, don't let this kind of content go in, go out. You can do that, use that. It's already there. It can be built into your prompt request itself. So before you pull it, you push your prompt, you can configure the moderation levels and filters, and it'll actually takes care. But you need a level before that, like I said, the use case based level. You are absolutely right when you say that the it shouldn't be like you are doing so many checks that by the time you get your response, the actual LLM response is too late. And that's why I said the cost of security cannot be so much higher than the cost of your actual business, that
Absolutely.
cost of security 10 times the business is one, right? It cannot happen
As
that
well
way.
as experience, right? Because many times these AI applications are interactive and are latency sensitive. So doing too many checks before you hear from LLM, I think it's going to be it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out. Yeah.
Anyone? So one more minute. I guess it's already 9:06. Anyone else? Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Someone was saying something.
Yeah, I would just give my own anecdotal experience with our application. As we're doing this, we've got these multiple filtering points, and we make sure that the question is relevant to what the services that we're providing, and that we have access to those things. The idea behind the agent in our application is that it moves much more quickly than clicking around and doing things within the application itself, from a standard UI or reading the documentation, going and figuring out. It's you ask it a question about what you want to do from this perspective, and it says, here's what you want to do, here's the page that you want to look at, here's where you want to click, upload your model, and in our case, your mesh, and then here's what I've determined about that. So there's this interaction that happens at all of these steps that Vishwan has said. It's like, here's a check, here's this thing, go to the LLM, come back, check it again on the output, input filtering, or input sanitization, output filtering, and that sort of thing. But it's happening much more quickly than doing all of those things manually. So the interaction is still pretty quick.
I see.
All right. Thank you, Sarang. Thank you, Edward. Last call for last question. I know I'm kind of extending, so I want to make anyone else who hasn't participated, Damodar or, Andre, Sharat, I know you asked the question in the chat, but if you want to speak out, please do. Ritesh, Prakash, Adnan, Manoj, Sunil. All right, guys. So enjoy your evening, and thank you again for bringing a lot of excitement today in this, which I think we can continue. And thank you, Edward, Prakash, and Vishwas for being the main pillars, with obviously Mike, Neil, Manoj, Ritesh, and Vigrado, and then Adnan, Damodar, and Andre, Sharat, Joseph, Mari. Good to see you here. And Henriette, do you have any questions, Henriette? By the way, you wanted to ask? You're back again. I thought you